That afternoon, I was sitting on the old rocking chair on the porch, sipping tea, while listening to the neighbors' children laughing in the backyard. Life in the Ohio suburbs was always peaceful. Everyone knew each other. Neighbors often dropped by with apple pies or invited one another to church gatherings. I thought the rest of my life would pass just as quietly. Until the phone rang. A voice message from my daughter-in-law, Lena. I assumed she was reminding me to prepare the pot roast for Sunday's family dinner. I pressed play, unsuspecting. And then her voice came through, not sweet as always, but sharp. "Ricardo, I can't stand your mother in this house any longer. She's such a nuisance. I found a nursing home on the edge of town, only $800 a month, much cheaper than having to keep supporting her." I froze, as if all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. My heart pounded, and my hands shook so badly I nearly spilled my tea. But it didn't stop there. "I've checked the house papers. It's still under her name, but Carol said there's a way to transfer it to us. Just a few $100s in extra fees, and it's done. In a month, your mom will be in the home, and this house will be ours." Then, Lena giggled. That laugh, what I once thought was charming, now echoed cold as ice. I don't remember how long I sat there after the message ended. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. All I know is that the words, "your mom," kept repeating in my head, each one cutting into my heart like a knife. If this were a TV drama, maybe I would have slammed the table, jumped up, and screamed. But real life is different. All I managed was a mumble that even the neighbor's cat on the fence paused to look at. "Oh, Lord, what did I just hear?" The cat yawned, turned its back, and left me in my shock. Even though it seemed not to believe it. I remembered, not even 3 years ago, I thought Lena was the best daughter-in-law in America. She always called me Mom, gave me a knitted scarf at Christmas, and praised my roast chicken as better than any restaurant. I once bragged to my friend Rose across the street, "God has truly blessed me with a daughter I never had." Who would have thought that now this very daughter-in-law wanted to throw me away, as if I were just old clutter taking up space in the house I had built with my sweat for 30 years. I let out a bitter laugh, one that was half choked, half sour. If anyone had passed by, they might have thought I was watching a sitcom on TV. But there was nothing funny about this. As the sun sank behind the row of low houses, I was still sitting there, turning it over and over in my mind. What could I do? Should I confront David, my only son, the one who always said, "Yes, honey," to his wife? Or should I stay silent and endure it? Then I heard myself whisper, "No, Grace Baker is not the kind of woman who's easily fooled. They've underestimated me." A thought flickered in my mind, painful yet strangely empowering. After 66 years of being a mother, a wife, a friendly neighbor, maybe for the first time, I would have to become a detective in my own house. And suddenly I chuckled softly, laughing through the shock, laughing at the image of myself in old workout clothes, notebook in hand, sneaking around like a retired Nancy Drew. Except this case wasn't about finding a missing cat. It was about saving my dignity and my home. I stood up and pushed the door open quietly. On the kitchen table still sat the apple pie I had baked for David and Lena. I looked at it, my heart aching. I no longer knew if anyone would ever eat it out of love, and not just out of politeness. But for now, I needed a strong cup of coffee. Tonight, I won't sleep. And starting tomorrow, Operation Grace would officially begin. Maybe to understand why I was so stunned when I heard that voicemail. We need to go back to the road I've traveled, the one paved with sweat, tears, and even a few moments so ridiculous that I still don't know how I managed to get through them. My husband, Tom, was a construction worker. He once promised he'd build me a big house with a wide porch where I could grow roses, but a job site accident took him away when David was only 10 years old. On the day of the funeral, I sat curled up in the corner of our rented suburban house, convinced my life was over. But then I looked at my son, those innocent brown eyes still asking, "Mom, will Dad come home tomorrow?" And I knew I had to get up. From that moment, I worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and working the late shift at a diner off the highway at night. Every day, I came home smelling of bleach, mixed with the greasy, fried hamburgers. People called it the smell of hard living, but to me, it was the smell of hope. I still remember mornings when I had only 3 hours of sleep, rushing to throw on a coat, tie my hair back, and head to school with David for PTA meetings. Once, I even fell asleep right in the middle of the teacher's presentation about the class fund. When I woke up, everyone was staring, and David was covering his mouth, trying not to laugh. My face burned with embarrassment, but from that day on, the other parents jokingly called me the PTA nap queen. Who would have thought that a single mom drowning in debt could end up with a royal title? No matter how tired I was, I didn't want David to fall behind his friends. Back in elementary school, when he wanted a baseball uniform, I spent a whole month washing extra dishes at the diner just to buy it for him. I can still see him wearing that number, 7 jersey for the first time, running across the field shouting, "Mom, I look like a Yankees player." My heart nearly exploded with pride, and suddenly the blisters on my hands from scrubbing dishes didn't hurt anymore. I used to dream that one day my son would have the warm family I couldn't give him. In my head, that dream was simple. A home filled with children's laughter, the smell of roasted turkey every Thanksgiving, and a wife who would be grateful for all his mother had sacrificed. I devoted my entire life to making that dream come true. Each night after my shift, I'd drive our old car back home, eyes stinging with exhaustion. But when I opened the door and saw David bent over his homework, I couldn't help but smile. Some nights, I pulled a leftover burger out of my bag and set it on the table. He'd light up like he'd just won the lottery. "Wow, Mom brought home treasure." I laughed, half touched, half amused. Who would have thought a cold burger could be a treasure for the 2 of us? That's how we lived patched together, poor, but full of love and little laughs. Now you can see why I put all my hopes into David's marriage to Lena. I thought that finally my son would have the home I had always wished for him. I saw that girl as my own daughter, until the day that voicemail shattered everything. I still remember the first time David brought Lena home. She stepped onto my porch with wavy blonde hair, high heels clicking on the wooden floor, and a smile that lit up the whole room. "Hi, Mom," she called me that from the start, even before she was married into the family. I'll admit it, my heart melted like butter left out in the sun. Lena knew how to talk. She praised my apple pie, saying it was as good as Starbucks, but way cheaper. I laughed, feeling both proud and a little silly at such a strange comparison. David sat beside her, beaming. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking, at last God has sent my son an angel. Initially, it truly felt like a dream. Lena often came over to help me cook, rolling up her sleeves to chop onions without complaint, even joking, "Mom, if I cry while cutting onions, don't think I'm sad, it's just the mascara taking the hit." I laughed, my eyes tearing up not just from the onions, but also from happiness. At the church BBQ, Lena even pulled me into a line dance in front of the whole neighborhood. I clumsily stepped on her feet more than once, but instead of frowning, she laughed so hard that everyone else laughed with her. That day I thought, daughter, I truly have a daughter now. But then, little by little, things began to change. At first it was just small comments. "Mom, this kitchen is kind of outdated. Maybe you should get new cabinets for a modern look." Or, "Mom, all these antiques in the living room make it feel cramped." I nodded, thinking she meant well. But only a few weeks later, I discovered that the teapot set my husband had left me had disappeared. Lena explained casually, "I donated it, since you don't use it anymore." I started noticing the flicker in her eyes whenever someone complimented the house I had spent 30 years sweating to pay off. It wasn't admiration I saw, but calculation. And David, my son, he never objected. Every time I tried to start, "Son, I think Lena is a little..." He'd cut me off with a raised hand. "Yes, honey is always right, Mom. Lena just thinks ahead." I fell silent, staring at the boy who once promised to protect Mom forever, now reduced to repeating two magic words: "Yes, honey." One afternoon while I was baking, Lena walked in, arms crossed, looking around. "Mom, I think this house is too big for you alone. If we move in together, you won't feel lonely and we'll save money on rent." Her tone was sweet as honey, but to me it sounded like thunder. I forced a smile and said, "Good idea, as long as I still get my own bedroom and don't have to sleep on the sofa." I tried to joke, to lighten the mood, but her eyes lit up in a way that sent a chill down my spine. From that day on, I started to see Lena differently, my perfect daughter-in-law. Maybe she only existed in my imagination. At first, I thought Lena was just a little nosy. But the more her suggestions piled up, the more I began to feel that something wasn't right. One morning, I had just finished brewing my coffee when I saw Lena holding my bank book. "Mom, I'm just helping you check your finances," she said in a gentle voice, like she was soothing a child. "Older people tend to forget things, so if I manage this for you, you'll feel much more at ease." I almost spit out my coffee. Forget things? Me, the woman who hasn't missed a bill in 30 years? I tilted my head and smiled sweetly. "Oh, that's wonderful. In that case, don't forget to pay my Netflix bill tomorrow. I wouldn't want to miss the new episode of The Crown." Lena froze, unsure if I was serious or mocking her. Meanwhile, I chuckled silently to myself. Let's see who forgets first. Then came the matter of my belongings. One day, I came home to find cardboard boxes stacked in the living room. Lena was casually packing away my souvenir mug collection. "Mom, these mugs take up so much space. I think we should donate them, make things tidier." I stared at the Grand Canyon mug I had bought on the only trip I ever took after my husband died. I sighed, picked it up, took a sip of water, and smiled. "You're right, but this one stays with me. It's my medicine against thirst and against nosy daughters-in-law." Lena forced a laugh while David just scratched his head and muttered the usual, "Yes, honey." What annoyed me most was how Lena started spreading rumors that I was forgetful. That day at a picnic in the park, I had just brought out my potato salad when I overheard Lena whispering to my neighbor Rose, "Sometimes Mom forgets what day it is." "I worry so much, Rose." Rose, known for being blunt, looked me up and down and then burst out laughing. "Forget the day? Just yesterday, she beat me 3 rounds of bingo in a row. She remembers numbers better than I remember my ex-husband's name. If that's forgetful, then I must have lost my mind years ago." The whole table laughed. I winked at Rose, grateful yet amused by the ridiculousness of it all. In the days that followed, I noticed Lena became more skillful at twisting conversations. If someone complimented me for looking healthy, she would jump in right away. "Yes, but Mom often wakes up in the middle of the night, wandering around the house." I worry so much. People gave me pitying looks while I thought to myself, if wandering at midnight while still managing to cook mung bean sweet soup counts as senile, then I should probably open a late-night diner. I started writing down everything she said, like a real detective. I even had a notebook, blue cover titled, "The Truth About Lena, Volume 1. I know outsiders might think all of this is trivial, but when you string it together from finances to belongings to rumors, you realize there's a bigger plan quietly forming. Lena wanted to paint me as a senile old woman, no longer capable of holding on to my own life. But what she didn't realize was that I, Margaret Baker, was still sharp, and sharp enough to play this life bingo to the very end. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the yellow lamp casting shadows on the old rug. David and Lena had gone to bed, but I stayed restless. My notebook, The Truth About Lena, Volume 1, spread open on the table. The messy scribbles I had written that afternoon looked more like chicken scratch, but reading them back, They resembled a draft for a show called CSI Suburbia Senior Citizen Edition. In my tossing and turning, I suddenly thought of my mother. She had been a seamstress all her life, her hands always threaded with needles and fabric. I remembered summer nights when I was a little girl with pigtails. She would sew while saying, "Grace, you can lose money, lose your house, even lose the man you thought would be with you forever, but never lose your dignity. Lose that, and you lose everything." At the time, I was 12, only nodding absent-mindedly because, honestly, I was too busy sneaking cookies off the shelf. Looking back now, I realize my mother was something of a prophet. I had let myself sink into such a pitiful state these past weeks, eavesdropping, doubting, then crying silently into my pillow like a heartbroken teenager. I looked at myself in the mirror and laughed. 66 years old and still crying with puffy eyes like Jennifer Lopez in a romance movie. I couldn't let my life end like this. My mother raised 4 kids alone in a 2-room apartment, no bigger than a shoebox. She never complained. All she needed was thread, a needle, and a teapot to survive. And here I was, ready to give up just because of a greedy daughter-in-law? The thought alone made my blood boil, as if I had downed 3 cups of black coffee in a row. I remembered how my mother used to deal with neighbors without ever raising her voice. Once she was accused of stealing pumpkins from someone's backyard. She didn't argue. She just quietly baked a big pumpkin pie and carried it to their house. Placing it on the table, she smiled. "Here's your missing pumpkin." Next time one of them wanders off, call me. I make great pie. After that, no one dared spread rumors again. I laughed out loud at the memory. Yes, that was the kind of cleverness I needed. No yelling, no self-pity, just sharp wit to fight back. I stood up, opened the closet, and pulled out the deep red suit I had once worn to David's graduation. The fabric was a little old, but it still held its shape. I tried it on, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "Welcome back, Grace Baker. The girl you used to be might have been naive, but your mother's grit still runs in your veins." The reflection staring back wasn't of a miserable old woman, but of someone gearing up for battle. I even felt so bold I nearly tried a little catwalk twirl, thankfully. I stopped in time before breaking a hip. I closed the notebook, The Truth About Lena, Volume 1, and laid my hand on the cover like a vow. I would no longer be the victim. I would fight with all the clarity I had left, with whatever shrewdness I still possessed, and with humor to keep me sane. In the silence of the house, I could almost hear my mother's voice echoing from memory. "You can lose everything but never lose your dignity." I nodded, whispering back, "I promise, Mother." And this time, I'll make sure they learn that Grace Baker is not senile. She knows exactly how to strike back. The next morning, I slipped into my deep red suit and spritzed a little Chanel number. 5 I'd been saving since my working days. Stepping out the door, I felt like I was walking onto the Oscars red carpet, the only audience being the neighbor's cat perched on the fence, licking its fur. It glanced at me up and down as if to say, "This old lady is about to pull something big." First stop, the bank. "Good morning, Mrs. Baker." Nora, the bank manager, greeted me warmly. She'd known me for 15 years and probably still thought of me as the sweet-as-pie type of customer. But this time, I walked in with a serious face and a firm voice. "Nora, I want to review all transactions from the past 6 months, and I need to check if anyone besides me has been given access to my account." Nora frowned and flipped through the records. Then she looked up, hesitating. "Actually, there have been a few times. Your daughter came in. She presented a power of attorney with your signature. I snatched the paper. At first glance, the signature looked like mine, but it slanted left, while mine always slants right." I let out a sharp laugh. "This is forgery. I may be old, I may be poor, but I never write leaning left. If I did, it would be because I was drunk on margaritas." Nora's eyes widened while I straightened my tone. "Cancel all unauthorized access immediately, and print me a copy of this paper for evidence." Inside, I couldn't help but think, 66 years old, and for the first time in my life, I felt like the lead in a detective movie. Too bad there wasn't a dramatic soundtrack every time I uncovered a clue. Leaving the bank, I stopped at the stationery store and bought a new leather-bound notebook officially upgrading from The Truth About Lena, Volume 1, to Operation Crimson. I also picked up a red pen because I'd heard detectives always like to mark evidence in red ink. Next, I swung by the post office to request a copy of the house deed. The clerk asked, "Any special occasion you need this for?" I smiled and replied, "Yes, the occasion of my daughter-in-law trying to steal my house." The poor guy's eyes nearly popped out. He didn't know whether to laugh or call the police. I winked. Just kidding. I'm still perfectly sane. That afternoon back home, I spread the paperwork across the kitchen table and organized the evidence like a pro. Evidence number 1, forged power of attorney. Evidence number 2, rumor campaign about me being forgetful, with bingo victories noted. Evidence number 3, my mug collection was donated. I took pictures of everything, saved them onto a USB stick, and even emailed a copy to a backup account. If anyone deleted one set, I'd still have another. The thought made me chuckle. I wondered if the FBI was recruiting any senior citizen spies. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I closed the notebook and drew in a deep breath. I was ready. Lena and David thought I was just a helpless old woman, but they forgot that anyone who'd survived decades of graveyard diner shifts and scrubbing office floors was tougher than they imagined. I lifted my glass of water, raising it like a champagne toast. "Congratulations, Grace!" The game officially begins. On Saturday afternoon, I carried a freshly baked apple pie over to Rose's house, the neighbor who had been my friend for more than 20 years. Rose was 3 years older than me. With silver hair, she always dyed purple at the bangs, making her look like a retired rock star. The moment she saw me, she hollered, "Grace, where have you been hiding? Don't tell me you've been online dating. I'll be so jealous." I laughed and set the pie on the table. "Not yet, Rose. But I do have something far more dramatic than online dating." In the kitchen, the smell of coffee blended with warm apple pie. Lowering my voice, I told her everything. The voicemail, the forged documents, the plan to put me in a nursing home. Rose listened, eyes wide, as if she were binge-watching a soap opera. When I finished, she slapped the table so hard the spoon rattled. Good Lord, if they're trying to paint you as senile, they've picked the wrong target. "Grace, we're going full-on Nancy Drew, retired edition." I raised an eyebrow. "Nancy Drew? At our age?" Rose planted her hands on her hips, grinning. "Why not? We've got experience, time, and senior discounts at the copy shop. What more do we need?" I burst out laughing, feeling the weight in my chest suddenly lighten. The plan came together quickly. Rose pulled out a large notebook and scribbled across the cover in red pen, "Operation Badass Housewives." "First," Rose said, chewing pie while scribbling furiously, "we need to track Lena's movements, see who she meets, who she talks to." "Rose, we're not FBI agents," I sighed. "We don't need to be. We've got senior discounts, my grandson's old camera, and the most comfortable Skechers walking shoes. Trust me, I once tailed my ex-husband for 3 months before catching him fishing with the widow next door." I gaped. "Rose, you're terrifying." "Terrifying but effective." She winked. Soon enough, we had an arsenal. An old camera, notebooks, and the binoculars Rose insisted on keeping from her ex-husband's surveillance days. That evening, while neighborhood kids kicked a ball outside, Rose and I sat on my porch pretending to knit, when in reality we were plotting. "If Lena ever found out, she'd probably think we really are senile," I said, sliding a knitting needle through the yarn while suppressing a laugh. Rose replied matter-of-factly, "Yeah, but remember, senile old ladies don't keep notebooks documenting every detail or know how to use a 10-time zoom camera." Amid our chuckles, I realized something. I was no longer alone. For weeks I had carried this burden alone, convinced no one would believe me. But now I had Rose Blunt, bold and hilarious as my ally. When I left, Rose patted my shoulder firmly. "Grace, you're not just my friend, you're my partner. If those kids want to play dirty, fine. But they forget. We may be old, but we're far from weak." I walked home, my heart light, as if a heavy stone had finally been lifted. For the first time in weeks, I found myself truly smiling. Monday morning, I put on my deep red suit again and carried a paper bag stuffed with evidence. The forged power of attorney, copies of my bank records, even a few photos of Lena accidentally boxing up my souvenir mugs. Rose had neatly labeled everything in red pen, Exhibit A, B, C. Looking at that bag, I was both trembling and amused. It felt like I was auditioning for a crime drama. Lawyer Ford's office sat on a small street next to the city library. Mr. Ford was in his 70s, short and stocky, wearing round glasses and his usual slightly oversized pinstripe suit. The way he looked up to greet me instantly reminded me of Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. "Mrs. Baker," he smiled warmly, "from your voice on the phone, I knew I'd hear a dramatic story today. But I didn't expect you to bring props as well." I set the paper bag on the desk. "Yes, and if necessary, I even have a witness." He raised an eyebrow. "Which witness?" "Rose. But she's busy trying on Skechers on senior discount, so she couldn't make it." Ford laughed loudly, then grew serious as I handed over each piece of evidence. He put on his glasses, examined the forged signature, and shook his head. "This forgery is amateur. You know, when I was young, I used to practice forging signatures to get out of music class, but at least mine were 90% accurate. This is pathetic." I gave a small laugh, though bitterness welled inside me. After nearly an hour, the papers were stacked neatly on his desk. Ford tapped his pen on the file and said slowly, "Mrs. Baker, you have enough evidence to file charges for fraud, forgery, and even attempted property theft." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to drag my son into court, Mr. Ford. But I also can't let them steal my dignity and my house." Ford gave a sad smile and nodded. "You know, there's a line in The Godfather I've always liked. It's not personal. It's strictly business. But in this case, I think the opposite applies. It's not just business. It's very personal." I burst out laughing partly because of the line, partly because of how seriously he quoted movies. It felt less like a law office and more like a cinema. We worked out the details. He would keep copies of all evidence and prepare backup files. I would continue gathering more, especially any conversation or message where Lena slipped up. "Don't worry," Ford said warmly. "The American justice system may be slow, but it protects the truth. And you have the truth on your side." I took a deep breath and nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ford." I was worried people would think I was losing my mind. He took off his glasses and looked straight at me. "Mrs. Baker, anyone who can tell the difference between a left-slanted and a right-slanted signature, who saves evidence on a USB and who has an ally named Rose, is sharper than I am. And I'm still practicing law." We both laughed. For the first time in weeks, my laughter didn't catch in my throat. When I left the office, a light spring breeze brushed my face. I clutched the now empty paper bag, but my heart was full of hope. I was no longer a victim. I had the law and a Hollywood quoting lawyer on my side. On the way home, I muttered, "Of course, Nancy Drew. Retired edition wouldn't be complete without legal counsel." And for the first time, I felt certain I would win. That morning, I rose early and tidied up the living room. I wanted everything solemn, like a miniature courtroom. The curtains were freshly washed, the coffee table decorated with a vase of red roses, and on the wooden table, I stacked the files into a small mountain for visual impact. Who says a 66-year-old doesn't know stage design? At exactly 10 a.m., David and Lena walked in. Lena wore an emerald dress, her face radiating confidence as though she were the star of a party. David looked anxious, clutching a Starbucks cup, eyes darting nervously. "Mom, what's so important?" David asked. Before I could reply, the door opened again. Mr. Ford entered, followed by two familiar local officers who carried his briefcase. And of course, Rose showed up, carrying a box of cookies. She whistled, "Well, this looks more like a Super Bowl party than a family talk." I cleared my throat. "David, Lena, today I want to clarify some matters. And to ensure fairness, I invited Lawyer Ford and the police." Lena raised an eyebrow and forced a laugh. "Mother, you make it sound like we're criminals." Ford said nothing. He simply plugged a USB into the Bluetooth speaker. Lena's familiar voice filled the room. "Ricardo, I can't stand your mother in this house anymore. I found a nursing home on the edge of town, only $800 a month. In a month, your mom will be in the home, and this house will be ours." The room fell silent. Lena turned pale. David dropped his Starbucks cup, coffee splattering across the carpet. Rose calmly grabbed a cookie and muttered, "Thank God it wasn't mine that spilled." "Starbucks is highway robbery these days," Lena stammered. "That was just a misunderstanding. I was joking." Ford laid the forged document on the table and slid it toward the officers. A joke? Forging a signature? Plotting property theft? I've watched a lot of Hollywood films, but I've never seen a prank this expensive. David's face drained of color. "Mom, I didn't know anything, I swear." I looked him straight in the eye. "David, you are my only son, but if you remain silent while your wife does this, then your silence is complicity." He dropped his gaze, stammering uselessly. The tension was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Then Rose, as always, broke it with her sharp tongue. "Lena, you're talented, I'll give you that. If Hollywood ever makes a movie called The Schemer in the Emerald Dress, you'd win an Oscar." The whole room laughed, everyone except Lena. She clenched her sleeves, lips trembling. One officer finally spoke. "We'll pass this file to the investigative unit. For now, you and your husband should prepare to work with a lawyer." Lena shot to her feet, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this, Mother. No one will believe an old woman like you." I slowly rose, hands on the table, staring right at her. "Lena, you're wrong. People will believe me because I have the truth, and I have this community behind me." Rose cut in, and me too, a nosy old lady with sharper eyes than a security camera. Both officers chuckled, and Ford smiled with satisfaction. When the door slammed shut behind Lena and David, I exhaled deeply. It wasn't over, but I had crossed the greatest hurdle, facing them head on. Rose slipped me a cookie, winking. "See, Grace." Nancy Drew. Retired edition, just one, round one. I bit into it, the sweetness spreading across my tongue. For the first time in months, I felt truly at ease. Just a few days after the living room showdown, news spread through the neighborhood faster than Black Friday discounts. Everyone knew Lena and David were under investigation for fraud, forging documents and trying to steal their mother's house. At the local supermarket, I had barely picked up a cart when I overheard two neighbors whispering, "Did you hear? Lena and David are in trouble. They forged his mother's signature." The other woman clucked her tongue. Oh, I knew it. That emerald dress she wore at the BBQ last year already looked suspicious to me. The whole neighborhood buzzed. Some blamed David for being spineless, and others called Lena greedy. At the barber shop, the men joked, "This is better than a free Netflix series. No monthly subscription needed, just grab a coffee and you've got all the drama you want." The investigators ordered Lena and David to return all the money they had withdrawn from my account, over $8,000 plus damages. For a couple accustomed to steakhouse dinners and Vegas trips, having to take on extra jobs just to repay debt was a bitter downfall. Their reputation in the community also crumbled. Lena, once the darling of church socials, now couldn't walk into the supermarket without whispers, There she is, the one who bragged about buying designer bags with a credit card. Better watch out, she might forge your signature, too. David didn't fare any better. At work, his boss pulled him aside and said coldly, "If you can't even protect your own mother, how can I trust you to protect this company's interests?" So his chance at promotion went up in smoke. Rose, my ever-loyal ally, loved pouring fuel on the fire. One day, she dragged me to the cafe, sipping her cappuccino while smirking. "Grace, you know what? The whole neighborhood is calling this the Real Housewives of Maple Street. Bravo TV should cast you as the lead." I burst out laughing. Fine by me, as long as they don't film me brushing my teeth in pajamas. The whole cafe cracked up, and for once I felt light. Who would have thought tragedy could turn into a collective comedy show? But there was no denying it. While I slowly regained peace, Lena and David began tasting the bitterness. From fancy dinners to frozen discount pizza, from staged happy family photos on Facebook to silent accounts no one liked anymore. I heard whispers that once, Lena's card was declined at the supermarket. She yelled in frustration, while the cashier just smirked. "Sorry, ma'am, system won't take it. Maybe because the signature's fake?" The story spread instantly, giving the neighborhood yet another episode of the free Netflix series. That evening, I sat with Rose on the porch, watching the streetlights glow softly. She patted my shoulder. "Justice is served, Grace. But the best part is you've still got your smile." I nodded, sipping my hot tea, my heart lighter than it had been in months. Betrayal had hurt, but I had risen at the right time. And now, instead of living in fear, I got to watch the very people who underestimated me bring about their own downfall, bitter, but also hilariously ironic. Selling my old house was a difficult decision, but I knew I had to leave a place filled with too many memories and too many wounds. With what remained after paying off my debts, I moved into a small apartment in a senior living community. Honestly, at first I feared I'd feel lost, but within a week I realized, oh my, this was exactly where I belonged. The complex had bright gardens, a small pond with ducks quacking every morning, and best of all, people who loved to chat, each with their own strange little stories. Rose, of course, was the most excited, declaring, "We've just entered season 2 of the sitcom Life of Grace." On my first day in line dance class, I was so nervous that I wore my shoes on the wrong feet. When the music started, I spun in the opposite direction of everyone else, causing the whole group to burst into laughter. A silver-haired man in a cowboy hat teased, "Mrs. Grace, are you dancing or driving in reverse?" I laughed too, thinking, 66 years old and still being teased for dancing, what a privilege. Then came art class. I never thought I had talent. Yet my first landscape, a patch of grass and 2 ducks, earned praise from the teacher as full of soul. Rose squinted at it and whispered, "Soul, yes, but that duck on the left looks more like a turkey." The whole class roared and my heart felt so light. Slowly, I formed a chosen family with my new friends Rose, the cowboy hat gentleman named Bill, and Martha, the apple pie expert. We hosted weekend BBQs, shared vegetables from the community garden, and even had a group chat called the Golden Avengers. Once we all went to the supermarket together, our carts full of discounted milk and chocolate. The cashier stared and asked, "Stocking up for Halloween already?" Rose shot back, "Nope. We're stocking up to outlive Halloween." The whole checkout line applauded as if it were the joke of the year. One afternoon, as I was leaving art class, I suddenly saw David and Lena waiting in the parking lot. They looked so different, thin, weary, eyes full of sorrow. Lena's voice trembled. "Mom, we know we were wrong. We've lost everything. And we realized you're the only one we truly need. Please forgive us." David took my hand. I was weak. I let my wife do wrong. I promise I'll change. Please give us another chance. I looked at them, a pang of sorrow in my chest. Softly, I said, Forgiveness I can give because anger never feeds anyone. But trust, that takes time to rebuild. Show me with actions, not words. They nodded, tears falling. I walked away, my heart calm. I had chosen a new life, one with blood family, but also with a chosen family just as warm. That night, I sat with Rose and our friends in the shared courtyard as a guitar strummed a country tune. I swayed with the music, a smile spreading across my face. And I realized starting over isn't frightening at all sometimes. It's the greatest gift life can give. A year later, I stood before the congregation on a Sunday. The small room was filled with golden light, the smell of coffee and waffles drifting through the air. People packed the seats, some even standing along the walls. Rose sat in the front row, waving at me like I was a pop star. I gripped the microphone, took a deep breath. My name is Grace. I'm 67. A year ago, I thought my life had ended when I discovered my own son and daughter-in-law plotting to push me out of my home. The room went still, everyone holding their breath. But it turned out that was the beginning. I shared my journey, from overhearing the voicemail to launching my counterattack to the showdown in my living room. Laughter erupted when I added, at 66, for the first time in my life, I felt like the heroine of a detective movie, only missing the suspenseful soundtrack. The crowd laughed. Tension dissolved. I caught sympathetic glances, saw a few older women dabbing at their eyes. Then I continued, my voice steady but firm. Forgiveness is for your own peace of mind. But forgiveness doesn't mean allowing others to hurt you again. I forgave David and Lena, but I didn't go back to living the old way. I chose my own path where I found joy and peace. An older man raised his hand. So, are you happy, Grace? I smiled, happier than ever. I have friends, a community that values me, and I have freedom to drink tea at midnight, to line dance offbeat, and to paint a duck that everyone mistakes for a turkey. The room roared with laughter again. Rose clapped so hard I worried she might sprain her wrist. What made me even more at peace was this. Over the past year, David and Lena truly changed. They moved into a small apartment, started new jobs, and no longer leaned on me. Sometimes they visited bringing fruit baskets or simply sitting to share tea. Lena no longer carried that arrogant air. Instead, she softly said, I know I was wrong and I'm still learning to live better. I hadn't forgotten the past, but I saw effort in their eyes, and that was enough to make me smile. Enough to mend family ties in a more mature and healthy way. That evening, I sat in the courtyard with Rose, Bill, and Martha. We raised our mugs of hot tea, listening to the crickets and the rustle of the wind. Rose leaned back, grinning. Grace, your past year was more dramatic than any TV series. If Netflix came to film it, they'd have to pay us royalties. I laughed, clinking mugs with her. Yes, but the only series I want now is called The Peaceful and Joyful Life of Grace. And I realized, at last, I was no longer bound by betrayal or pain. I'd learned to stand up, protect my dignity, and reclaim laughter. My new life was simple but full of freedom. Freedom to be myself. Freedom to love in the way I chose. I sipped my tea, smiling with ease. No matter what had happened, I still had the most precious things, a heart that could forgive, a spirit that could defend itself, and a circle of friends who made the later chapters of my life warm, funny, and filled with dignity.